Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. So, Ben, part two.
Refreshed and
ready to go. I think I've put too much milk in your tea. Give me some feedback. We spoke about uncomfortable conversations before. I think I put too much milk in there.
There's still a subtle undertaste.
Is it builder's tea? Is it shit?
It's good. It's wet.
Okay, it's wet. It's wet. It'll do. It's moist. Before we spoke, we got up to the fact we were talking about moving into those first sort of stages of leadership. But people who are familiar with your story, I know they may have listened to the first part of our conversation and go, Jesus, I read so much more about what was going on, and where's the harrowing bit? Because as you started to not accelerate, but as you started to move through these parts in your career, you were going deeper down the rabbit hole of development and picking up all your skill sets, picking up your workplace trainer stuff. It goes sour. It took a twist.
Let's get to the bit where
it took a twist. Yeah, let's get to because it's the hero's journey. I love that aspect.
Let's get on to the therapy session.
What? Hey folks, I wanted to jump in here and just share with you a really exciting update from our partner William Wood Watches. They are launching the first ever field watch collection. Now it's named Fearless, which firstly, I absolutely love, and this new collection is very different from anything they've ever launched before. However, you will see that they've managed to maintain some of the signature William Wood Watch elements. The big thing for me is that black fire hose. So they have got the first ever time they've done this, the black fire hose strap, and a really, really cool case back. So now the watches are available in 3 colors this time. These are red, orange, which is my favorite, and the yellow. Each watch features those straps that are made up from repurposed black fire hose. That stuff looks the absolute bee's knees, guys. They've never done that one before, so go and take a look at that. And they've also got a textured dial to represent charcoal. Honestly, I never know how they're going to keep going deeper with this. Every time they do, I'm like, where are they getting this from? But I know where they're getting it from, because they're speaking to the boots on the ground. They're speaking to you, they're speaking to me, they're speaking to firefighters and frontline operators and getting just these amazing insights. The creativity in this is amazing. Now, the case has come down in size from 41mm to 40mm. And another new thing is they've got a unique firefighter helmet visor case back. So flip it on the back. In fact, go over to the website and you'll see the photos. That visor case back, guys, it just looks absolutely incredible. Now, the watches are available to buy immediately, like right now, and they can be delivered within 24 hours in the UK and 48 hours from UPS collection in the US. The link to William Wood Watches is in the notes below this episode. You will not regret it. I am 100% putting this on my list. I'm going to be nagging them like crazy because I know you can pay in 3 stages as well. You haven't got to go in full whack on this. The new Fearless collection, William Wood Watches. Go check it out. Where do we start with that? I said before, you sent me so much fantastic information, but I just felt overwhelmed because it was incredible how much stuff that happened after that.
I think really the start point is getting back to states of mind. And I know certainly that one of our mutual friends, James Bull, down in Hertfordshire, is coming on to the podcast. A guy, if any of the listeners want to check him out, a guy who's done the Marathon des Sables, running basically 6 marathons in 6 days across the Sahara Desert, raising awareness for various mental health, the Antarctic Fire Angels,
such a good
group of girls going.
Similar with yourself, I need to retouch base with James. Actually, I'm really, really interested in how we just need to nail that date. Yeah.
Well, I mean, both those groups and individuals are focusing on states of mind. Well, for me, again, by that stage, I was in my early 30s, and I'd. It's weird. I mean, I'm not going to say midlife crisis, but you're at a little bit of a crossroads. Now, to give you some background, and again, this is one of the reasons that I'm very outspoken about the firefighter cancer thing. We saw 3 of our colleagues die of cancer, particularly a guy that Paul Barra, who trained with me, was on our recruits course. Lovely guy, ex-Royal Navy diver, solid fireman. No aspirations to, be in charge and anything. Just really wanted to, again, service community, be good at his job. He was a really solid pro. And Paul ended up beating cancer twice. And obviously fought his way back to work. And then, third time, there was some stuff also in his personal life it wouldn't be appropriate for me to sort of broadcast, if you will. And he seemed to just sort of fade away. And it really sort of got to me. And then, Billy Vinton, who we worked with in the East End of Newcastle, great guy. Very, very sporty, always been very fit. And again, Billy, within, months of retiring, gone as well. And I'm looking at these people, and I'm not going to say it's the first time you sort of touch with mortality. Obviously, you'd had like grandparents die and that kind of thing.
Also,
but
the job can bring you to you can have quite a personal relationship with mortality through the job as well at times.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. And I'm thinking, this guy's that used to get changed in the locker next to me,
gone
on station, gone. And you think,
life that old as well, especially how old?
Yeah,
40s.
Paul would have been
40s, late 40s.
Younger than that, I think.
Is he really?
Paul would have been in his 30s.
Jesus.
When he sadly passed. Billy would have been maybe only around 50. And it knocks you, because you start thinking about, okay, life really is short. What is your legacy? And I was there thinking, well, I ought to really start thinking now about settle down. I mean, you've been kind enough to, have me in your home, and I can see sort of the photographs of your family around, and
your kids and stuff.
It's a real sort of positive legacy.
Take one with you if you want. We've got 3. We've now decided we'd like 2, but we've got 3, so we just need to get rid of one. Palm one off.
Buy 2.
Yeah, buy 2.
I noticed the family photographs. I didn't notice the television, so that might explain it.
Yes, no man, no TVs in not that you've been in the bedrooms, but no TVs in the bedrooms. We've got one TV in the lounge, rarely ever gets used. Hate the goddamn thing. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, so anyway, that was it. And really, in my head at the time, you grieve him without necessarily thinking about it. And I'd recently split up with Susie, who's my girlfriend, in probably my mid to late 20s. And Susie's great. I mean, we still, with the one notable exception, I'm still on speaking terms with all of my ex-girlfriends, which is probably dispels some other other rumours. But I mean, don't get us wrong, I'm not popping round for teas and coffees or anything like that. But I tend to get a Christmas card, and occasionally they'll ring us up. And
I'm terrible at keeping contact with people. I'm terrible. Fair play to you.
So I was very, very emotionally and vulnerable, I would say, at the time. But it was one of those things, obviously, in the in my late teens and then through my 20s. It was, you could be in those days a little bit of Jack the Lad outside of work, and it was sports, social.
Sometimes walks hand in hand with the firefighter as well.
A little bit of, womanizing as well, shall we say. And again, what I tend to say...
The women are just as bad, by the way. So there's some women in the job.
Anyway. I wouldn't mix business with pleasure.
No. I mean, just like the way they treat some guys outside of the job. And there's some wonderful married ladies in the job as well, but it works both ways, boys and girls.
It was there. and don't get us wrong, you look back now with the perspective of someone being a bit older, and myself and a couple of the people who were around at the time, my colleagues who remain nameless, because
there were some animals back then.
I think some of them are now engaged or married. Yeah. We'd never lie to people. Nobody got hurt, emotionally damaged, and although like the way we behave, we're never going to have like a #MeToo thing attached to us,
Yeah.
We're never going to be. Well, I've already been cancelled, but they're not going to be.
I think mine's on the list. I'm en route.
We're never going to be cancelled. So, that was it. And you're probably looking for something as well that isn't there. Thinking, I want to settle down. I want to have a family. This, that, the other. And I ended up meeting this woman, and it's easy to say in retrospect, but we met and everything seemed ideal. Sort of, reasonably attractive. Had the appearance of being a, I'm a successful sales rep for GlaxoSmithKline, selling pharmaceuticals to, GP surgeries and this, that, the other. I've got my own flat. I've got this, that, the other, and
a together lady.
Yeah, or certainly the appearance of being so. Like cold reading or con artists when it's obviously picked up and let me basically do all the talking. We're on this podcast. You can obviously tell that I can ramble on a little bit. Sit there and nod and yeah, I want that too. Yeah, I think we're exactly, and just positive affirmations. Yeah, I want the same thing. I think we're at the same stage. We can really, and on paper you'd say, or the impression which she gave me, everything perfect, and she was like sort of the whole sort of whirlwind romance. Next thing she wants, let's buy a house and all this kind of stuff. And at the time, I mean, I'm not from any kind of wealthy background or anything, but because I bought my first house when I think it was £16,000 in like a redevelopment area that had been built adjacent to where they had some riots in the northeast and burnt out in the early 90s. But in sort of the late 90s,
but you managed to get it yourself.
I bought something there, got on moved a couple of times in the interim, and made sort of equity value. So it was never in your pocket. But you'd gradually kept sort of a relatively small mortgage, but I'd a decent amount of equity. I was like, well, you're going to sell your flat? Yeah, I will do. But I've got to do that. So I ended up, like, say, buying this house, moving her in, and the next thing you know, it's like a complete change of character. I forgot to mention the small detail of that she organised a wedding at short notice as well. With no one else, and like a sucker, I walked straight into it.
So you got married?
Yeah, which was, I remember standing at the front of this church, and there wasn't anyone there. It was that which was completely.
Which might be romantic for some people,
but completely to her volition. But she'd.
You must have wanted to a little bit.
Well, I think it was the idea was more attractive than the reality, because I was emotionally off kilter. And people throw around the term mental health. Obviously, at that time, because of the guys dying of cancer, and your own personal doubts, because of probably aging, touching mortality. Mm-hmm. I didn't have the clarity of thought, and I was probably for the only time.
The window of time starts to close on your ability to find somebody you think you're going to spend the rest of your life with, if there is such a person.
Exactly, and I was probably attracted by the idea and that concept more than the reality, and I didn't have the support network at the time to say, "Hang on, what you're playing at, Ben." So I remember standing there thinking, what am I doing? And as soon as that happened, it was literally like a switch was flicked, and people will talk about like emotional abuse. It was right. She'll control all the finances. She'll make these decisions. She isolated me from like my friends. I don't want people coming round. This is a private house. This, that, the other. Yet she was going out when I was on night shift. As I found out, when we once were driving, doing the old loop past the bars. I don't even know why at Gateshead. We were right over in Newcastle, but for some reason we were. Drive by thinking, yeah, that's definitely her. And then next morning,
so you didn't. Yeah, you stepped away from your social circle. You didn't spend time with your friends.
Yeah, that was it. She isolated me. She'd be very charming to people if she did meet them, but then she didn't want anything. And then behind closed doors, and she was siphoning my money, and I managed to get sort of under subject access request.
Did you not have your own bank account?
Well, that was it. It was, you don't need this. We'll have a joint bank account, and she siphoned away 40k.
What?
In the days when I had money, But
Jesus, man.
Yeah, basically all my savings and everything at the time, and I went abroad. So at the time I was into CrossFit and stuff, and we had a little interest in a little community CrossFit club that we set up for kids that didn't have very much, so they could come and train and so on and so forth. And we went over to Enschede in Holland, FC 20. Because some of them were doing the CrossFit coaching badge, and at the time there wasn't many in Europe, so it's only a 40-minute flight to.
That must have been a wicked trip.
Newcastle. Yeah, it was enjoyable. But I got back and I went to the airport to get some money out, and the account was empty. So I ended up having to jump on the metro, so like the tube, not paying, and got back, and it was like again, what alcoholics refer to as a moment of clarity. I was sitting on the metro going back thinking, I don't want to be going back to this house, basically trying to walk on eggshells to sort of keep her happy, having the constant demands. And I've sort of lost myself. I'm sort of, who am I? I've lost that identity. So I think
back. People do have that when they try really hard to please somebody else, like the person. And again, I've read bits about your personal circumstances, but I do see certain aspects of it with other people where they try so much to please somebody else that they lose all of themselves in the process, and then the other person starts to despise them because they don't know who they are, because you've spent so long trying to be somebody else, you don't know who you are, and you just lose yourself.
I think I was in danger of. I was probably at the start of that path.
Okay.
And people had noticed stuff at work, and she'd been abusing me as well. I mean, she was she scratched all my face up and various other things, and people had noticed things at work and not said, and it was a difficult time. But I made that decision on the. When I sat there on the metro on the subway there, and I don't want a beer. So I went. I walked in and I was like, where's my money? What's happening? Well, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. She'd been worked out, and I think you've got the bank statements. You see, she went through. I think as well after taking that 40k cash, she also, raced through. I think it was £23,000. In weeks. I mean, which is mental. Basically, more or less cleared me out. So you had the equity that was in this house was there, and some obviously cash that was held back, which I was going to then stick in to pay a big chunk of the mortgage off.
What was stopping you from raising the alarm bells then? And I know you're going to get onto it, but from the domestic abuse and things like that.
Yeah, I mean,
Had you ever been in a fight together, as in, or did you feel it was one way, or I don't know, don't get too much into the weeds with that.
It was a case of she wanted everything her own way all the time.
Okay.
And very, very, I look now sort of emotionally abusive, withdrawing things. And when I got in touch with some of the former boyfriends, and it turned out the predecessor to me, was a firefighter in Tyne and Weir's brother. And this particular firefighter knew what she was like, and obviously had heard that I was going out there, didn't say anything. And I remember his governor, station officer, was a pal of mine. And when it all came out, we get a little bit down into this story. He said, well, yeah, I know what she's like. She did exactly the same thing to my brother. He said, well, it's fucking useful knowing that now, isn't it? He said, why didn't you speak up, when this all started? So I got back and I said, look, I don't want to be with you. I think we've made a huge mistake. I said, I'm going to go down to the Midlands for a week. And I said, we can get one of those, those quickie divorces. So do you take back what...
They call annulments or something, is it?
I'm not sure whether it wouldn't have been far off, sort of.
How long have you been married?
For annulment. By that stage, you're talking weeks, about 5-6 weeks.
Really?
That's
wow. Okay,
that's how it is. So I said, well, you take back what you bought in, which at that stage was hardly anything anyway. Yeah. I'll take back what I've bought in. I'll give you 10 grand, and we'll go our separate ways. Yes, it's very embarrassing for me, might be embarrassing for you, but, so what? And she turned around and says, the only way you're walking away is with nothing. She goes, I'm going to take everything from you. She goes, I'm going to have all your money. She says, I'm going to have your career, and I'm going to have your life, unless you give me everything and you walk with nothing. And I sort of laughed, went, all right, yeah, that's good. At least, and then she'd shown herself for what she was at that stage. So I go away. I hired a solicitor who said, well, you've not been married a year, so you can't get divorced, but we're going to issue a separation notice, and also because she's got access to these funds to basically put a freeze on, say your balance as of now cannot change. She cannot spend any of this. It needs to be frozen, needs to be deposited in an account somewhere. So within about 2 or 3 days, she got that letter.
How much are solicitors? Scary.
A lot. Yeah. I mean, I think
a horrible career to be in.
Footballers' wages. But
Jesus.
Then the next time I was back there, about a week later, I walked in and she was looking at a watch. Kept looking at a watch, and I'm saying, well, what are you going to do? And she was going down the same line. And she'd arranged for me to be at a certain time, and all of a sudden, then she starts like screaming and shouting at us, and this, that, the other, like apropos of nothing, completely out of the blue. Next thing you know, there's a banging on the door. Now there's 2 double doors. It was like a glass porch outside, and then sort of a solid wooden door. Opened the door. 2 police officers stood there. Turn around. She's on the floor, clutching her head, going no. I hadn't touched her at all.
Okay.
And it turned out that her mother had rang the police from a remote location, said, I think my daughter's being abused. And the police turn up at this time. They set me up.
Okay.
So I got arrested on suspicion of assault, taken to the old Market Street police station in the centre of Newcastle. It was attached to the fire station, which fortunately had closed by that stage. Otherwise, I'd have been paraded.
Still, I imagine they had to inform your employer or whatever anyway. When were you due to be on?
Well, I think that was either my second or day off, or I might have been on 12 days leave or whatever.
Okay.
But I got taken in, slung down the cells, the usual stuff when they used to rough you up a bit. And Old Victorian Station in the cells, nothing to do. This was probably about the lunchtime, and I didn't get interviewed till 9 o'clock at the night. And the police read out this statement. And I remember the police station rep that sat with us was a guy called Steve Davis, not the snooker player.
No.
But he's dead ringer for Jimmy Nail.
Okay.
The actor.
The actor, yeah.
And the police officer, and it was a PC, the names are there, but it was a PC Natalie Williams said, as I approached the property, I could see Mr. Walker stood in a threatening stance above a person who we now know to be the complainant, and who was obviously in a state of fear. And that's the criteria for what's called common assault. Putting someone into a state of fear is common assault, whether you touch them or otherwise.
Really?
Now, it got pointed out then. I said, well, you couldn't have done. I said, why? I said, because there's 2 doors. So goes, the outer one's glass. I said, but the inner one's solid wood. So you didn't see anything as you were approaching the property. Oh, well, when the door was open to us, I could see you in a... I said, well, if I'm stood there and she's behind me, I said, you haven't seen anything, because I've opened the door to you, haven't I? Okay, well, that's the thing. Well, some was there. And I said, well, was anybody else in that house? No. And I said, well, if she opened the door, I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have been standing over her. If I opened the door there, and it was basically the police officers were caught lying during that interview. Steve Davis said, well, look, if you've got X-ray vision and can see through doors, I think your career's wasted in Northumbria Police. So that led to, they immediately tried to rearrest me. That interview was then terminated, and that allegation was what I call no further action.
Okay.
At the time. They tried to rearrest us then for making threats to kill, said there's no evidence, it's an illegal arrest. So that got NFA'd. And then they kept us overnight for a breach of the peace, and that got binned as well. So the next day I got kicked out the police station, no further action. Now, naively, at the time, I didn't know they meant to actually give you a copy of the interview tape and a transcript. Never got any of that, and that's crucial because nobody has ever seen or heard. There's no record of that interview anywhere.
Really?
Apart from like the custody sergeant's note saying there was an interview, there was found to be no corroborating evidence, so this is no further action. It's been requested for years and years, but has never been provided, and it's still going on now through the ICO's office. But let's put that to one side. So
okay.
I obviously then leave. I go straight to work. I was with Tyne and Wear at the time. I said, look, this has happened. This is my situation at home. I want to let you know, because so you don't hear it from anybody else. Because I didn't know what the protocol was.
I wouldn't know if a firefighter came in and said that to me, particularly what to do about it.
I'd never been arrested before, and had no involvement with the police, whatsoever. But certainly no negative involvement with them. So, that was the crack there, and we, moving forward. Then she obviously got this letter, separation order, so on and so forth. A month later, I then get a phone call from Northumbria Police saying, "Can you come and be interviewed?" So why? Say she's made further historic allegations against you, which obviously by that stage I'd left that house, which she was insistent on. That's why she had us nicked. Although she had places she could go, I didn't. I'm not from the northeast, and moving forward. So I turn up to the police station and I say, "Okay, I've heard you want to interview me. What's going on?" They sent us away. Wouldn't interview us for another 2 days. Then had me back in. So she said this, that, the other. Now, she produced something, I think you've got a copy. It's referred to as the Dateless Diary.
Okay.
And it's in 2 different styles of handwriting, which is bizarre anyway. Saying, "Oh, he's done this. He's... on this day, we were driving here. He squeezed my head. He threatened me. He's done anything you can think of." Now, it would be interesting to actually look at the plot lines of the soap operas at the time and see if anything was similar. Like the Scottish guy who was giving Little Mo a hard time in EastEnders or something like that.
Okay.
Like that kind of thing. One of the allegations. I
suppose in that time though, there was a lot of in both respects. My wife was in a relationship of domestic violence for about 15 years, and as was sincere, the gentleman did go to prison. So there was a lot of examples. So if anybody, and there has been lots of, I don't want to say fraudulent, but there has been lots of allegations made against lots of men and women, but predominantly men, that have not been substantiated. But people did go to prison for it, sometimes for legitimate reasons, sometimes for not. So there was, again, similar to what we said earlier about the fire service, people were probably scared to death of not defending somebody like that if they were sincerely in trouble.
Yeah, and at the time, Vera Baird was a police and crime commissioner for Northumbria. It was one of her pet projects, violence against women and girls. But there's also websites like Mumsnet, where on the forum, there's people talking to each other saying, well, if you say this particular buzzword or phrase, the police or social services or whatever have to take this action. It's like a trigger. So,
which for people that are really vulnerable and don't have the ability to speak out is probably very useful. But again, similar to some equality stuff we see in different companies now, if you wanted to hit a buzzword and get a reaction, you could do.
Well, people who manipulate it, for me, they take resources away from legitimate victims who need it.
Mm-hmm. And people that cry wolf.
And that's one of many things that really gets to us about it all. So, the producer thing said she's made this allegation and a mother and a friend are backing her up. And it was just absolutely ludicrous, and obviously it was like denial. And if anything, I was too candid and said, I did argue with her. And things, I have had heated arguments with her, but, at no time has anybody been in fear. And if anything, I've been in fear of her. So we went through this interview, and there is actually a transcript of this one. But this is where it gets bizarre, and this is something that's not been was only uncovered at the back end of last year. To charge offences or alleged offences, the police would normally go through their CJS department, and the Crown Prosecution Service would assess something. Now, everything that is recorded in a police investigation goes into a police prosecution file, and they follow a SOP. Now, most of our listeners will be fire service, so they have a standard operating procedure, which in the police, it's the Director of Public Prosecution's Manual of Guidance, hence MG. So, like witness statements, for example, are recorded in their MG11 forms. A summary of evidence is on an MG5 form. A decision to charge is normally recorded on an MG6 form. So a police prosecution file will have a number of these MG pro forms filled in with the relevant details, and a prosecutor will look at that and give a yay or nay on whether we can charge or not. Now, the police can bypass that and charge themselves for low-level offences. So it's normally drink driving, things like that.
Something they don't need to go through a formal process of. Yeah.
So they'll still have all these MG forms, but if they charge themselves, it has to be recorded on an MG6, another one of these performers. Who's authorised to charge, on what grounds, does it meet the threshold for charging, so on and so forth. Well, it turns out there was absolutely nothing. The subject access request, which I've only been able to make since GDPR, this police prosecution file's empty. There's no MG forms in it, and I believe you've seen the letter from Northumbria Police, obviously, that confirms that. So I was in a situation where I got charged, but there's no record of anybody authorising the charge.
What did they charge you with then?
I was charged with common assault ×3. But here's the interesting thing as well. The first allegation that I was arrested and interviewed for with no further action was charged. Now, if something's previously had a no further action, to then be charged for it, you have to be re-interviewed about that specific offence. There has to be new evidence put to you. Now, that never happened because we've got the transcript of this second interview. So it was just bizarre, but I was in that position then, again, never having had any encounters with the police. I didn't know whether the protocol was being adhered to correctly or not. And my strong opinion is that the investigating officer, she looked at me, thought, this guy looks like a Staffordshire Bull Terrier, shaved head, muscles. At the time, because of, injuries, I had a couple of gold teeth. The only thing
you're
I
not
was
doing
lacking,
yourself any favours
exactly,
there.
All I needed, if I'd have sat there in a white vest with a can of Stella.
Were they aware of your profession?
Yes.
So as a member of a public service, there would be an expectation you, of course, do not have these types of characteristics. Yeah, you don't behave in that way. You should have different values. And
Northumbria Police have previously arrested our previous chief fire officer on suspicion of shoplifting.
Oh dear.
So, which was ridiculous. He was at B&Q.
Did he get charged?
Yeah. He accepted a caution, which was stupid again, but it was naivety because he was at B&Q in Sunderland he bought 400 quid's worth of stuff, and he was at the till, and his phone went. He was obviously the duty principal for the weekend, control ringing him. It's like keys, wallet, phone, money, and he put a 50p doorstop in his pocket. So he paid for all this stuff. When he walked out, the beepers went off. B&Q, well, it's our policy to hold people who do this. No decentralised common sense decision making. Police came, we've got to take you in and interview you about it. And they conned him really in, say, well, if you accept a caution, nothing else, it'll go no further. He was obviously just worried about the appearance of it and everything, not realising a caution's an admission of guilt if you accept it.
Okay.
Well, if I was him, I'd have said, no, get the chief constable down here. This is ridiculous. No court. No, they'd never have charged him, and no court in the land had found him guilty.
Okay.
But they stitched him up, he accepted this caution, and as soon as he was leaving the police station, you had the Newcastle Evening Chronicle and Sunderland Echo photographers there that night.
Oh dear.
Thief, fire officer, chief is thief, shoplifting, shame of the bull, and all that kind of stuff.
So what did they say he'd stolen, sorry?
A 50p door stop.
A door stop? Like a door wedge?
Yeah, a door wedge. Keeping fire doors open with. But no, it was... but it was ridiculous, and there was a few other things, like somebody... And we've all been there. You've been desperate for a wee, and you've gone somewhere that you perhaps shouldn't have.
Okay.
Yeah. So one of my...
Well, like behind a house or something.
One of my other colleagues end up having a wee behind, the big recycle bins that they have at supermarkets. Somebody saw him, took his number plate. Police went round. Said he's done this. Look, I'm sorry. I was desperate for a wee. I've been out all last night on the piss or whatever. My missus was in the supermarket, and that was it. So they charged him with that again. Someone, if you forgive the pun, leaked it to the press. Press such and such Sunderland fire chief. It's always saying it's the chief. He was a station officer. Say in car park exposure shame. So,
right,
you know what I mean?
his exposure thing.
Making it sound, implication of that thing, like it was some kind of sex offence.
Yeah.
Which couldn't be further from the truth. And, I know both, obviously the former chief, and I know them both well, and both really, really great people. So there's a little bit of needle between certainly the brigade and the police force in that region. And when I've... encountered other stuff. I know that LFB and the Met tend to get on fairly well.
Okay.
When we used to do sort of the joint training stuff down there with the coppers, there was a usual bit of banter, but they had a sort of a decent-ish relationship. Where at the time Northumbria Police and Tyne and Wear Fire Service, there was certainly no love lost.
That's a shame
at all. And I think things have changed, and hopefully so. But
so you were charged with three common assaults.
Common assault, causing somebody fear of violence. Now, this is really where it gets interesting, because when you're preparing for a court case, obviously I pleaded not guilty,
and
I actually got remanded into Durham jail, which is ridiculous for that kind of level of offence. So I was on E-wing.
Okay.
With waiting, it was bizarre, because I remember getting there and I recognised a few faces in there just from sort of round and about, a gym and various other places. And I had this absolutely bizarre situation where there was a guy from North Shields where I lived who was in there. He was talking to the prison officers, saying, "This guy isn't meant to be here. He's not one of us." Saying, this guy's like, proper fireman and all this. And, I was there for a while, and eventually they managed to bail us. But prior to the trial...
How long were you there for?
I was on there for only a couple of weeks, fortunately. I'll tell you something.
Still, though?
You don't...
Weeks?
You do not want to be there. I mean, overall, like the amount of time I've spent in police cells and this, that, the other, having your liberty taken from you is...
So at that point then, if you're in there for a couple of weeks, your service must have, they'd been made aware.
Knew by then.
And they suspended you, or...
Yeah, obviously I was suspended on full pay.
Okay.
But the issue that I had was as well that it was obviously causing some issues, because behind the scenes, the chief superintendent of Northumbria Police at the time was a guy called Graham Smith, whose brother was a guy called Gordon Smith, who was in our FP department. Now, they'd obviously had a chat at some kind of family event, and he said, "No, this guy ain't like that." And they convened a meeting, and they had the investigating officer, this DC Tracy Kirk, you had the chief superintendent, and they organised this meeting, and like I say, social services there, and I got told by one of the representatives from Tyne and Wear Fire Service who there said, the chief superintendent said, "Look, I've got some information on this guy. Everyone says, he's a bit lively, but he's a straight bat, and this isn't is this just a case of a very heated divorce and mudslinging? Mm-hmm. Which for me, I would interpret on giving, that's an out.
Okay.
That is an option for someone to say, yeah, this can be nipped in the bud. Now, the guy that went from Tyne and Wear, or one of the two representatives, I can't name the other one because it will compromise the source, apparently then said, and it was, say, a little bit of a rival of mine, shall we say, we'd had a few differences of opinion, said, well, he's a bit of a loose cannon, so I wouldn't put it past him. Yeah, there you go. There's your favour, which then, in the police's defence, not that they deserve much of one, they're in a position then to say, well, okay, well, in that case, you've not given us, where you or I said, no, absolutely, one of our finest men or women, this, that, the other, this is ridiculous. It'd been nipped in the bud, and don't get us wrong, your feet probably wouldn't have touched the ground when you got back to the station. You'd have been in doing some serious explanation. Mm-hmm. And, been suffering sort of the consequences inside of work, but, that was that. So that guy didn't do me any favours whatsoever, and that was my first real insight into, the fire service family, as in inverted commas, not being what it should be. But to revert to the story, prior to any trial, there's a process called disclosure, where in order to prepare for any trial proceedings, the police or the prosecution have to provide you with, basically the case against you. What evidence have we got against you which justifies this charge? Mm-hmm. This is how we're going to attack you in court. You can prepare your defence. Well, we never got anything, despite a number of requests, and the trial actually got put back 3 times. Okay. And this helped to obviously disprove the pregnancy claim, because by the time it got to trial, it had been so long.
You'd been released from...
Yeah, so they let us out, but on stringent bail. So I had to basically...
Were you allowed to go back to work?
Yes, but on amended duties. So I went back to training school, teaching, and doing various things, and sort of general sort of dog's bodying. And that was a weird time, because people that knew us seemed to be quite sort of empathetic, or even, dare I say, pity of this, and others were just sort of shunned us.
Keeping the distance.
Yeah, I mean, no, some people just wouldn't want to be near us, and there was a couple of people who I didn't know too well who really tried to support us at the time, and one of them's no longer with us, a guy called John Hall, who was the commandant of the training school at the time. John really tried his best for us, and a guy called Vince O'Neill, who a lot of people may know.
Vince O'Neill, I know that name.
Vince was the senior training officer at Tyne and Wear's training school for a long time. Vince really, tried to support us and other people, which I'll be grateful for. John's no longer with us. God rest his soul, another death of cancer. But she was making accusations, everything under the sun. I mean, all the time. I mean, so I was arrested on a number of occasions. One memorable occasion was I was arrested on suspicion of sexual assault. But when I have a DBS enhanced now, so this guy's been arrested for sexual assault, even though obviously it's come basically because of that. But there was accusations after accusations. She made complaints to the service as well. Claimed she didn't know I was off the run at training school. Okay. But she claimed that a fire truck from one of my old stations had rammed her off the road, and made a complaint to the police and the fire service, which turned out that obviously machines have trackers on them, so control know where they are. And as soon as it was checked with control, said, no, this fire engine's 3 miles away from where this has allegedly occurred. And I think one of them might have even still been on station. Okay. But absolute rubbish. And you'd have thought the police had wised up at the time and said, hang on, she's making countless allegations. She claimed that some of my colleagues had assaulted her when they'd seen her on a night out. She was obviously so traumatised by events. She was out on the piss on a Saturday night in downtown Newcastle. Saw some of my former colleagues, claimed that they'd assaulted her. That was another one. And my favourite was she made a complaint against Ian Bathgate, who was our chief fire officer at the time, and Ian was a very, very smart guy, and said, Ian's running the brigade to fight a personal vendetta against me, they're stalking me, they're doing this, that, the other, because I've been subject to all this abuse. And obviously they wrote back, the crap preliminary investigation, no case to answer. Wrote back, said, if you've got a problem with it, go to the authority. You've got a problem, write to the minister. Wrote to the fire service minister's office saying, Ian Bathgate's running his brigade to fight a personal vendetta against me. I mean, even at government's most depraved levels, I think they'd have laughed at that. It had gone straight in the B1N file. But that was the relentless approach that she wanted till she got what she wanted, which was obviously the money. And whilst all this was going on, these criminal allegations, the divorce procedures get put on hold.
Okay.
You see, so it couldn't get done. Her end game was basically get him done, and then I can base the divorcing on, say I was abused, I deserve to have all his money, which is the way that it panned out. But we never got any information, and we got to the stage where it was magistrates' court, and I may as well not have even turned up, because it was sort of like, say, the prejudice on appearance. They looked at us, they listened to stuff. We proved she was lying. It actually went into 2 days.
Wow.
And, all it was he said, she said. And we had the same police officer that can see through the wooden doors, by this time had changed their story and saying, well, that was it. And we went through that again, but we didn't have the tapes or a transcript of that interview. If we had the tapes or transcripts of that interview, we could have done exactly the same thing. Oh, well, you're lying. And this was no further action. Why has this been, this charge been actually brought? And we didn't have any information, so they couldn't challenge the legality of it. Now, in retrospect, what the defence should have done is just said, we are not going to go to court until you provide this information. But there was pressures on me, because I was getting, obviously, work saying, you need to get this dealt with and back to work, because by this stage I've been off work nearly a year.
Wow.
And there was various other things, and a lot of my colleagues turned up at court as well. It was a full gallery, and it was just bizarre. And after they retired to met the verdict for 5.5 hours. Now, for 5.5 hours for a low-level defence, that would suggest to me that it's unclear. Now, if there's doubt, or if there's reasonable doubt, someone should be acquitted. You can't. And they came back, and the actual words they said was, well, we don't agree with everything that the prosecution have alleged, but we don't believe everything the defence has said. We think there's been some bad behaviour, and because this is low level, we're going to find you guilty and give you a fine and community service. Where if they'd have believed the allegation she was making, it should have started at custody. It should have sent you to prison. Now, this is one of my problems then started, was inadvertently I had to then go to work, obviously, and get before the the top table, fully expecting to be dismissed, and they obviously knew stuff that I didn't, like all these false allegations that she'd made at the time. Because on one hand, it's very difficult for me. They sat there and they said, look, we think you've suffered enough. We don't think you've done it. We've had people at the court said the whole thing's farcical. She's a liar. We think you've been stitched up. However, keep your head down for a couple of years. Said you'll be a DO in 3 years, group manager. Right, okay. And at the time you think, well, I'm going to lose all this money on the thing, but at least I've still got a job, and I should have a decent pension, which I would have been cashing in a couple of years' time. Things then took a real turn. So I was in, obviously, Tyne and Wear, and at that stage, I didn't really have any money, and no real support, nowhere to stay. But she contacted the regional newspaper, which is the Newcastle Evening Chronicle, who ran a front pager, which she actually gave them a photograph of me from my personal collection that she'd retained from when we've been on strike in 02, actually, of me mugging with we'd rescued a dog on the picket line from running across the road, and it was either a staffy or a bulldog or a boxer. So I'm there mugging with it, and it's the old archetype as well, isn't it? Apart from I had hair then. And hero fireman is vile wife-beating thug. Front page. There, this, that, the other, he's done this, he's allegedly threatened pregnant women, this, that, the other. And in the early days of the internet, that was online, and it only got removed last year. So any time after that, anybody Googled Ben Walker firefighter, they think hero fireman, vile wife beater, and obviously things get repeated on different things, and that came back to haunt us. So obviously struggling in Tyne and Wear, and they did, in their defence, I think they tried to help me, but it was in the intention was good, the execution wasn't so good.
Okay.
And so I got back to work, and I was having to commute up from the West Midlands, go up on a Monday morning and basically stay over. And I was working at the training school at the time, and I was sleeping on the benches at the training school, and then obviously coming back for the weekend. And to be fair, they said you can work 4 12-hour days.
Okay. So
I got like 3 day weekend. I started looking, thinking, well, I haven't got any money. I've got to go, back to where I'm from and see what's available. Now, there was one particular brigade that were recruiting at the time, which was a Shire brigade, not a million miles where I'm from, but not Staffordshire and not West Midlands, but somewhere else. And they were advertising for watch managers. So advertised, went down there, got there, and they basically said, somewhere in the interim, and I was candid with them, I told them all about exactly why I was moving at interview, but I think I was interviewed by people from their county council rather than the actual service. Okay. And somewhere in the interim, something had happened. So I got there and they said, oh, we haven't actually got any watch managers positions, so you're going to have to do a firefighter's role. I was like, well, but we'll give you the first one that comes up. Well, okay, and we'll pay you as a watch manager. I thought, well, that's a bit odd. But, nevertheless. And then when I got to this particular brigade, obviously, news had gone before you, because people talk of different brigades, and at the time, Tyne and Wear were training a lot of people, and a couple of people from that brigade had gone up there. And like anything, people going, oh, such and such, I believe, is going to you. And do you know this about him? And I got there, and it was just absolute hell. Now, it wouldn't be acceptable what happened in Tyne and Wear. It wouldn't be acceptable, really, in any brigades. But I got there, the station notice board had that newspaper article, or the online version had been printed off and put up there. And I found out later that was on every station in their brigade, up on the notice board. I was having stuff tucked under my car windscreen. When you're in pubs or whatever, in the toilets, there's the anti-domestic violence posters and that kind of thing. I was having them tucked under me windscreen, stuff like that, through the internal mail. And just no one wanted us to be there. And like everything they could try and pick up on in terms of, criticism, they'd be trying to be on you. But I tried to put that to one side. I got in touch, or tried to get in touch with the FBU in that particular brigade, and I made, 50 or 60 efforts, talking emails, phones, and I later put a complaint in to RAC and DARC and various others. And I said, look, here's the phone records, here's the emails. I said, I tried to get in touch with these people. I said, they hung us out to dry. They never got back to us. And in the end, I spoke to a cousin of mine who was a station officer in Leicestershire, and he got in touch with their union guy at the time. He was a guy called Chris Argent, who had quite a productive discussion. And then again, my cousin, made a few inquiries, and Leicestershire at the time wanted somebody to go as an instructor. And I met the deputy chief fire officer at the time, a guy called Ian Scarrett. And I believe Dave Webb was the chief, and I went over to their headquarters, which was new at the time, a place called Birstall, and said, look, this is the situation, this is why I've moved. And he said, well, I've asked a few people, and you've had it rough, you've had you've had the short end of the wedge, shall we say. And he said, would you be prepared to work day shift for a couple of years as instructor? Yeah, no problem. I mean, because it would have been anywhere from an hour to hour and a half to get over to Leicester every day, but
that's a trip.
It's not the end of the it's not the end of the world, is it? And it's a little bit going on there, and that cities, with the new football team and everything, they've got a little bit of lift and
I suppose
a bit of stuff going on, and so obviously I went back to this particular brigade, and they put this paperwork through and said, look, I've got an opportunity to go over to there. I'd only been there about 10 months, to go over to Leicestershire. I'm not enjoying it. You obviously don't like me. I don't like it here. Why? We can both shake hands and move on.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I'd have gone over to Leicestershire and things had been a problem, then obviously I'd have been the problem. But the brigade in question refused it and said, no, we're not going to sanction you moving over to Leicestershire.
Wow.
And then about 3 weeks later, again, week before Christmas, I got pulled in to a meeting, and there was a guy who was a station manager, so not even a senior officer, and a girl from HR, and they said, look, we're letting you go. I said, what do you mean letting me go? I said, I'm not subject to any disciplinary procedure. I'm not subject to any performance capability procedure. What's the issue? And they said, well, technically, said you've changed your employer from Tyne and Wear Fire and Civil Defence Authority to X and Y County Council.
Mm-hmm.
Said you've been here less than 12 months. You've got no employment rights. We don't have to give you any reason. Said, pack your locker and get out. And obviously, FBU, I think that they'd done a deal with the management to get rid of me. So no representation, nothing, and no help. They basically sold me down the river. And I said, well, what about my previous service? And they said, continuity of service is only for pay and pensionable purposes. And it was ridiculous. And I couldn't get anything from the FBU. And there was two emotions. One, I felt relief because I was out of that environment. But secondly, I was there, and maybe naive. I thought, well, it's all right, I'll go to somewhere else. Now, at that stage, the FBU, I managed to get in touch with the regional office, and at the time the executive council member was a lady called Rose Jones, who was ex-West Midlands Control, who again sadly died of cancer. And a guy called Brian Moss from Staffordshire was involved, and Rose was a long-term sick, so their office was in turmoil.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Everything that can go wrong would. And Brian ended up getting in touch, but by which time I'd been binned about 3 weeks, and he got in touch. They went to Thompson's, and Thompson's solicitors looked at it and said, well, this is absolutely abysmal, the way this guy's been treated. And because I'd raised concerns about the firefighting as well, and certain things that had gone on, they said, well, technically, this guy could be categorised as a whistleblower as well, because they had an out. They could have let us go to Leicestershire, and if things had have gone sour over there, then it would have been all bit. You could have validly said, right, it's your own issue. But they chose to end my career and livelihood, and that's what really has got to me.
Hey folks, just wanted to jump in with a quick piece around firefighter health and wellbeing. Now, we get a lot of messages and emails into the podcast around firefighter health and fitness, whether you are trying to join the fire service and pass them tricky fitness tests, if you are currently serving, or if you are coming up to that next chapter of your life, retiring from the emergency services. we get so many different questions around it. So in partnership with Fitness for the Frontline, we have come up with a series of guidance and programs specifically designed to reflect the physical elements of the role of a firefighter. So whether it's carrying an LPP across an overgrown field, lifting a ladder above your head under running it, or wrestling with cutting gear for 30 plus minutes at some kind of complicated RTC, our bodies are required to lift, push, and carry objects in very specific circumstances. That is effectively what Fitness on the Frontline focuses on, as well as the longer term aspects of overall health and wellness for our firefighters. There are focuses around strength, endurance, and overall conditioning, all achievable and relevant to our roles. Now, we are definitely not about to be smashing out world records or getting that beach body ready in 6 weeks rubbish. The systems and programs that we put in place are adjusted for people's current fitness levels, and they're not a prescriptive weight or a one-size-fits-all BS. We also take into consideration all the fitness testing for initial application and also for current firefighters who want to maintain and progress their fitness levels. It is very likely for myself personally that I'm still going to be a firefighter when I'm 60 plus, so longevity in the role is really important to me, and I know it is for so many people out there. The system has a built-in ability to adjust easily depending on the equipment you have available, your fatigue levels, or if you're coming off busy-ass night shifts and you haven't got a lot of time to work out. You can record your results, log your weights, your body measurements. We've got all the facilities to do that. The system is yours to use how you want to train. We've taken all the fluff and the gimmicks and the BS away from most of the rubbish that you see out there. And this is designed by experienced operational firefighters and qualified people, including myself, with members of the team available to contact throughout the time you are within us in the program. If you ever get stuck, if you're starting to struggle, and also to celebrate those wins and achievements with you. It all starts with no obligation, 7 days worth of the programming, absolutely free. So whether you're joining, serving, or looking at the next chapter in your life, have a glance in the link for the podcast. Fitness for the Frontline is designed by firefighters for firefighters. Now back to the show.
So really within the course of 18 months, I'd gone from being sort of on top of the world, if you will, with the world at my feet, to basically having no money, no job, losing everything, having a criminal record for something I didn't do, and being in a real mess. Now,
what was your head like?
I think it was because you were so stressed. I mean, the alopecia had kicked in massively as well, stress related. So like no hair, no beard, nothing. Yeah, it was just sort of shocking, really. But I was, you know,
I ask because I'm amazed that you just
naively
didn't hurt yourself or something.
Naively or arrogantly as well at the time. I thought, well, you know, I've got all these skills. You know, I've got every instructor ticket. I've done this. I've worked at the busiest stage. I've run big jobs. I've done, you know, X, Y, and Z. I've got a commendation for allegedly outstanding leadership. And I thought, yeah, you know, it's not going to be a problem. So I started ringing up a lot of the brigades, and they say, right, HR, well, we're not recruiting at the minute. Well, you know, I'm actually, yeah, I'm competent and all my tickets are in and this, that, the other. Well, you've had a break in service, so the only way you can come is apply to an application thing, and you're not eligible because you've got a criminal record. And I went, and it turned out, I found out that obviously the brigade I'd been at that had binned me had also then done a number on us. Really, I think, trying to disguise how they treated me when I was there. And one of their friends or colleagues from another brigade, which was North Ants, took it upon himself, and this was a middle ranking officer who was a divisional officer, to contact every HR department of every fire service in the country and say, oh, if you get any contact from this guy, have a look at this newspaper article. And obviously forwarded that through by email or whatever.
Somebody to do that. You never worked at that brigade, though?
Never worked with that brigade. It obviously was friends with people in the brigade that had binned us, and decided to take it upon himself. It was either, you know, a letter of we're not recruiting at this time, or if you managed to get a compensation, it would be, oh, your break in service is a problem. And the only guy that actually would meet with us was the Chief of West Midlands at the time. He was a guy called Vij Randanaya. And Vij, and he didn't have to do it, and I was appreciative of it. He had us in, he took us for a coffee in the middle of Birmingham, and he sat us down. He said, look, he said, this is where you're at. He said, I know I could put you in charge of any fire station in this brigade, and you do a fabulous job. He said, however, the first time you fall out with somebody, and he said, and you do, and everyone does, he said, if they then decide to get in touch with, the Birmingham Mail, the Express and Star, Coventry Telegraph, wherever you may be, he said, then I'm dealing with a newspaper headline saying we've got a convicted criminal in charge of a city centre fire station or whatever. And he said, and it's risk exposure. And he said, I've discussed it with the fire authority. And he said, it goes, the risk versus benefit isn't considered to be worth it. And he said, I'm not saying that's my own personal opinion, but it works. So
everyone's got bosses.
Yeah, but I appreciated it because he'd given me the dignity of taking the time to consider it and at least let me know that he'd consider it. And although obviously it wasn't really what I wanted, because I always eventually wanted to go to West Mids. I wanted to be chief of West Mids.
Really?
That would have been my thing. But he took the time, and I was grateful for him doing that. So I was in a mess because I got to a stage where then what meagre funds I had were completely exhausted. And I'm hoping that nobody who listens to the podcast ever has to go on the dole, because it is soul destroying, and it really sort of devalues you, coupled with that sort of identity loss. I think, what were you? I was a fireman or firefighter. It is so difficult, and I applied for 800 jobs, and from everything really, from real sort of entry level stuff and I got knocked back for every single one of them, and nobody was interested. And I went for a couple of interviews, just stuff like warehousing, and people were looking at it and saying, look, I'm looking at your CV. Even if you start here, it goes, someone's going to offer you something good and you're going to walk. So I couldn't get anything. It was just utterly, utterly depressing. I mean, I had enough. And I remember a guy that we used to work with as well died in the interim up in the northeast. And I remember going up to see them at his funeral, and I was in such a state, obviously, emotionally, and I got no money at the time, that I think it actually shocked a few people. I mean, not saying, because I'd had to sell everything. I mean, even like your clothes, so on and so forth. And I think I was up there in like trainers and tracky bottoms and whatever I had at the time. And really, it was a case of, I was going to go and say goodbye to anybody that was there who cared, because I never knew whether I was going to even make it through any time. But yeah,
what path did you see through from that? So
nothing really. I mean, I don't think you can. I think it's a day at a time, really. And initially, and then hopefully sometimes there might be a little bit of a ray of light that sort of comes through. And I was fortunate in that, well, it's like somebody else's misfortune. A guy ended up sort of with severe diabetes, who was a truck driver for a guy I know who's got a rubber company, and he needed somebody who could drive. And although I never did much driving at work, I'd got my LGV for moving the trucks around at train school and everything, and ended up driving for him, and going all around the West Midlands, down the Black Country, picking metal up and everything from the forges, and then taking that back, and then the rubber going out in the other way. So I ended up doing that and lifting, doing bits and pieces. But while I did it, two things happened. That I got the opportunity. I got a fire magazine, something sent to us, and I saw an appeal for help for an organisation called International Fire Rescue Association, David Kay, who were based out of Scotland, saying, can you help give your time or whatever, because we need equipment to send out to brigades that need help. And it was also the applications for IFE exams as well. And now obviously I'd gone down the statutory route at the time. I thought, well, could I do this? And just to test myself. Now, obviously, I didn't have access by that stage to any manuals or any of the stuff. So I was obviously firmly out of the job. And it was a case of the time. So obviously I didn't earn much of, being hungry for a week to get your application money in to do the exams. Now,
Why were you doing the exams?
I think really just to prove something to myself.
Okay.
I mean, for a number of years, I think we're too far down the line now. I probably harboured some kind of hopes deep down of getting back.
Why do you think you're too far down the line now? How old are you?
I'd only go back as a chief.
You'd only go back as a chief?
I think I'd only go back as a PO or like principal officer, or I'd certainly lowest level, probably area manager in charge of training or something, because now your skills are starting to become, we've got a strategic outlook, but I don't think they'd have me back, to be
How old are you?
Quite frank. 43.
43. So you're still quite young, really. I won't retire until I'm 65. So in my mind, you've still got 25 years left, or 22 years, sorry.
I'd been firmly on the run now, like 7 years or so.
Yeah, 100%. I know people your age that are joining the service.
Suckers.
But, mean.
But we,
So you did these exams?
So I did these, and I was really, when I was driving, if I was caught in traffic or we were waiting to, drop off somewhere, or, JCB or wherever, I'd just do a bit of study. I sat the exams, and it was probably the last time that West Mid's old academy was open, where they had the old exam hall, and I ended up getting the top marks in the world.
Wow.
And they used to give an award out for that, the Godiva Award, and I remember picking it up, made a little bit of a speech along the lines of, thanks very much for this, and thanks for giving us the opportunity. It's a shame that I've no longer got the opportunity to put it in to tangible use. And a guy took me under his wing.
That must have been a horribly surreal moment.
It was bad in some ways, but a guy took me under his wing called Bill Goff, who we've mentioned, who was, I think Bill had just retired as, he was basically the senior operational officer for West Mids. He was like the top DO. I mean, 43 years in the job, worked everything, worked as a station officer at Answorth when that was a war zone. Been there, seen it, done it. Great guy, but so dedicated to firefighter safety and so on and so forth. And Bill very kindly really sort of took me under his wing a bit, because he could, see that, I didn't really have much. I didn't have any sort of prospects. I'm just doing a bit of driving and, doing what I can. There's no sort of shame in that, you're contributing. And, Charlie, whose firm it was, I mean, I'll always be grateful for him for, giving us the opportunity to do something, because it allowed you to have the dignity of, like I say, having a little bit of money in your pocket so you can, buy, your mate a drink, something like that.
Just being part of the sector again that you clearly have a passion for as well.
Yes.
So what opportunity was that?
So realistically, after that, there was an issue that LFB had got into partnership with Babcock to run the training school, and at the time it was a collective of LFB trainers. It was still very much in its infancy, and there was other people being brought in, and I knew a couple of people, sort of ex-Tyne and Weir, who'd gone down to do it, and they said, get in touch, and fortunately with a couple of good references like Bill, and I think him and others might have had a word and said, use this guy. Why you can, I think rather than just seeing me sort of rotting and wasting away. And I got the opportunity to go down there, but it was weird in that I think they were so desperate for people coming in. There was there wasn't really any check. It was basically down there straight into it, and I really enjoyed it down there because we had a really good team, and like Dave Wilson, who we mentioned earlier, and some good people, and Mick Lewis was on the team, who many of the listeners might know best as Saracen from Gladiators.
Yeah.
In the 90s.
Still on my list. I know it again,
Mick,
actually.
What a great guy. And we used to have a laugh. I used to say, Mick, I goes, you must be the toughest guy in the London Fire Brigade. I said, why is that, Ben? I said, because if anybody I knew was wearing pink lycra on national TV, whether it's 20 years ago or not, I goes, I'd still be taking the piss, and nobody's doing it here. So you must be
doing something right.
So he's... It was good, and we used to go up to High Wycombe, which is actually in Bucks, live fire training there, and various bits and pieces. And the Southwark Training Centre was in, and radical difference really for me, sort of being from the provinces, even the second city, and I really enjoyed it. And an old friend of mine, Nick Jeffs, again, he's not in the fire service. Nick lived in South London at the time, and he was ahead of his time. He had one of these garden rooms before COVID, and he used to allow me to rent that from him. When I was down there in the week, and I used to go down Monday morning and go back sort of Friday afternoon, and obviously stay over. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, because although you weren't in the gang, and like I say to people, I never worked for LFB. I worked at LFB's training school, and you get to come into contact or know people or get introduced to the work of some really good people down there. I mean, one of your other guests, Steve Dudney, being one. I'm very much looking forward to Steve's book.
Interesting guy,
coming
Steve.
out, and real sort of tactical oracle, and also the sheer sort of vast sort of size of it and the problems it brings, and it gives you
a colossal thing, isn't it, London?
And even sort of running the training, and the turnover, and you've got your observations. There's good and bad about it all, but it was for a while. It was very, 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 very stimulating. I really, really, really enjoyed it, and it did.
So, what was your role with it then? Were you obviously a trainer? What did you train?
Trainer.
Fire behaviour stuff. By the sounds
generally fire behaviour, which is obviously my passion. But I think my job title was I was a multidiscipline senior instructor or something. So allegedly I could teach like other stuff as well. But
how long did you do it for?
Skills fade. I started, I think, about 4 years.
Really?
All in all, 3 or 4 years. And I really enjoyed, certainly the first couple of years. But what happened then was Babcock started to fade out the LFB operational trainers.
Okay.
And bring in guys from, other brigades, generally who had been retained. I think it was just a cost thing.
Okay.
Bringing people in, but again, metropolitan brigades, and again, I'm not knocking the individuals, because people are given an opportunity, but it's metropolitan firefighting, whether it's Newcastle, Manchester, Liverpool, London, it's got its own challenges. Now, as rural firefighting, rural firefighting is very, very demanding in a different way.
Different, yeah.
But I never really had to do, wildland firefighting in the middle of Gateshead.
Yeah.
But I spent more time in the sky than the RAF doing high rises.
Yeah.
So it's instructing. You don't need to be, a great player to necessarily be a great coach. And I think the same thing as the instructor. However, it helps if you've been there, because it gives you an empathy. As Steve Black,
gives you authenticity as well, doesn't it?
And I could say, well, I can teach about high rises because I've been there, done it, and got the T-shirt. I can teach about fire behaviour because I've got the chicken skin around my middle for when it goes wrong.
Yeah,
I've got, and I had really good empathy with them, and because as well, there's a lot more, it's a lot more banter and chat. I mean, I remember the first day I was teaching, and I sat there at Southwark in front of the class, and I introduced myself, and I think there was a few bods on from sort of over the East End, so proper Cockney white boys, as you'd call them. He said, he goes, answer me this. Goes, what do you really know about this? He goes, you're from the north. All you lot know about is being poor and greyhounds. I said,
Okay.
well, I obviously know more than you, otherwise the chairs would be facing that way, so keep your mouth shut and listen and learn something. So, but the dynamic changed a little bit because they sold off Boris when he was mayor, and various others sold off the Southwark training centre, which is basically kicking the arse from London Bridge and the Shard.
Yeah.
Really central, easy to get to. Whereas, and then they had opened 2 venues, one up at a place called Beckton, which is out near Barking, and the other one Park Royal, which is up near Wembley.
Okay.
And even from where I was living in South London, near Crystal Palace, a place called Gypsy Hill, it was an absolute nightmare. I mean, for example, if I was to go to Beckton, and because you go in between the centres, you've got your kit bag, and London's all public transport, you've seen the size of them. I'd walk down to West Norwood train station, train to Crystal Palace, overground up to Canada Water, Jubilee Line tube to Canning Town, Docklands Light Rail to Galleons Reach, bus to Galleons Reach shopping centre, and then about a 10-minute walk on the end to get to work.
Wow.
Whereas beforehand, even on my first day, Lichfield, Trent Valley, into Euston, 10 minutes on the Northern Line, less than an hour and a half door to door. I mean, so it became a real, it started to become quite onerous.
Commute can kill
as well. So it knocks us about. I mean, even like on the first day, getting down into London and then getting out to one of those 2 venues with kit is hard work. And then obviously the incident with Dave happened. I've mentioned that they started reducing the amount of the crews, and you know yourself. I mean, I'm not sure how many wears your brigade do in training.
Not enough.
Limit for but instructors, it's the other way around. The danger is doing too many. So we were getting knocked about, and there were some people who were wearing daily, sometimes twice daily, because Babcock brought in this concept of a half wear, which is just bizarre, absolutely bizarre. I mean, I do some quite high level health and safety stuff as well, and it's a load of rubbish. But again, the people that they were bringing in, and trainers, instructors who maybe retained in other brigades in the south, they were really happy doing it. And some of the older hands, myself, Dave, saying, you've got to be careful doing this. Said, otherwise you're going to start cooking yourself up. And it's happened before where people have basically started cooking their internal organs. There was a guy up in, I think, Strathclyde, ended up turning his liver into pate. So he was doing so many hot wares all the time. And we know a few people that have had issues, and I believe there's been 5 or 6 cardiac events at Babcock's training schools in and around hot fire.
It's a worry.
It is a worry. But the first one, again, people had been wearing too often, and they were doing a basement exercise, and Dave was in the basement, and I can't even remember what I was doing, but I was out the back somewhere, and I was just looking at the smoke thinking, this isn't right. This isn't right. What's coming out, the composition, the speed of it. So I'm going to have a look. So I went, picked us out, went under air, and I poked my head around the front, entry control boards going, the Merlin boards, telemetry. Yeah. And I can see the group being debriefed about 20 metres away. I'm thinking, why is no one doing anything about this? So
like a DSU was going off.
Yeah. Okay. So I went down the back stairs into this basement, opened this door, smoke layer, and flames in the smoke layer down to about 2.5, 3 foot off the floor. Dave's prone, lying there. So I picked up the branch up, obviously, knock it back, drag him out, or what I thought was out. I thought I'd close the door, and ended up taking him up like the 2 flights of stairs.
Bloody hell.
Out, and it's hard. I mean, it's a struggle with 2 of you. With 1 of you, even like say your adrenaline's going. I mean, I think I ripped 5 hernias Like, it ripped all his stomach open. Steve's about probably 14.5 stone, so we kit on probably 17, 18.
Yeah.
And, you know, going up 2 flights of stairs from a basement as well.
That's a good 95 kilos, something like that. Probably heavier. No, heavier.
It'd
110 probably.
Yeah, probably maybe even sort of 120, but the weight distribution as well is difficult, and you've got, obviously, you're sat on yourself.
When you think most people train with a 70 kilo max casualty, that's heavy. Very heavy.
Yeah, and it's normally 2-person lift with
a
70.
Yeah.
So we ended up getting Dave up and out, and he was at a way to hospital and so on and so forth. And I ended up going to hospital because I didn't close the door quite correctly. So I'd like say even make cock-ups and, you know, it was starting to get warm, and we got him out of there. And I went, I had a check. And when I got back, it was a case of a narrative had been created because we'd expressed concerns about the amount of times that people were wearing, so on and so forth. They tried to frame this narrative that Dave had staged the whole thing. Now, I was down there. I know he was out of it. He was gone. If he'd have been down there probably 2 or 3 more minutes, he was dead.
Yeah.
That was it. You know what I mean? Nothing else. But nothing was done right. Those sets should have been impounded. There was issues with the interviews. You know, what were people doing? There was no. It was quite a farce in that if I was doing it, obviously I couldn't do it because I was a material witness. Everything was wrong about it, and when I got back to work, I was asked to change the statement that I'd made to fit that narrative. Did Dave say anything to you that he was going to stage this? Did he do that? And it was heavily implied that they wanted to blame him, and he was on a 0 hours contract. So he was retired, and easy
to get rid of.
They binned him off, and the implication was on me was you can get promoted here, or you know, do what if you do this. And I said, look, it's not what I do, and I said I know what was there. It was there. I told the truth. You know, obviously I'm not always believed, and I was put in a position, and all of a sudden, this was like Friday. On the Monday, that newspaper article, the online version, had been printed and circulated amongst all the Babcock staff.
The original one from the...
Yeah, about the criminal conviction. Hero fireman is vile wife beater. So, coincidental or not, and a load of grief. And it was traced back to a guy... SJ, and he had circulated it, and then there was various. It was the same as in sort of Tyne and Wear, in that people made this petition, like happened in Tyne and Wear, saying we don't feel comfortable working with somebody that's been convicted of a violent crime or an allegation of violence. And in Tyne and Wear, the principal officers said, you don't know the details of this. We run this brigade. We know the details. You know, keep out of it. They were sort of there. And I remember talking to Nick, I mentioned earlier, I used to rent his back room, like the garden room. And I said, where do we go from here? And he said to me, if you get sacked again, he said, you're finished completely. He goes, you're knackered. He said, you've got to resign. He said, you've got to resign and have your integrity intact. And I was like, well, I know what it's like being on the dole. He goes, I don't really want to. And he said, if you don't, he said, they'll probably move to get rid of you on something. And he said, and then he goes, you really have had it. So I put my notice in the next day, and they didn't ask us to work my notice. And then I went, we had a little bit of a settlement from them for various reasons, because to disclose somebody's criminal record, it's actually illegal under the
GDPR.
Well, it's legal aid sentencing punishment offenders Act 2012. You know, it's illegal to disclose it.
Well, it's character assassination, isn't it? So, defamation of character.
Yeah, so I was gone again, but I was fortunate in that I'd done some bits and pieces for International Fire Rescue Association, and I got the opportunity to go out doing some relief work with them. So I ended up over in Argentina.
Wow.
On a few times, and which was good because one, it helps with your Spanish. Secondly, it's the best diet in the world. Loads of red wine, loads of organic meat and veg.
Wow.
So you're doing that and drinking 6 beers a night and coming back ripped. That's the answer.
Okay.
That is the best diet if you can get it. And we were. I really, really enjoyed it because it really got back to the whole purity of it.
What did you do out there?
We're training.
Okay.
Training sort of mainly the volunteers, the Bomberos, the Voluntarios.
Yeah.
And obviously IFRA had provided them with kit and equipment and fire engines and everything, and we were out there sort of training them in everything really. And
how did that come about? Just pause for a second, because that's a hell of an opportunity.
Yeah, well,
somebody must have trusted you to do that. That's a great thing.
Well, Dave Kay, OB and Bar, their chairman. We'd correspond, and I'd tried to help within the limits as I could. I'd written to a number of brigades and said, "Can we have your old kit and everything?" And most of them said no, but I think he saw that I was trying, and he knew I'd had a hard time. Because it's like, say, at one stage there was everybody in the UK Fire Service seemed to know my story or a variation thereof. Okay. With embellishments or people's own interpretations put on depending who you talk to. But Dave, I think, realised that I'd had a rough ride and gave me the opportunity, and which I grabbed with both hands, but it got back to sort of the purity of why we do it, because these people, they wanted to serve, they wanted to make a difference. And although I say second world, not really third world, they didn't have much, but
no,
they really welcomed you into their communities, to their lives, and looked after you, and made some fabulous friends out there, and it was great. So I went there, and I was thinking, well, I was starting to write quite a lot of stuff down because we had a couple of translators out there, and I thought, well, why don't I write this stuff down about what I know? And I thought the way that fire behaviour had been taught and various things have been taught, it lacked that little bit of clarity. And I thought, well, times are changing, and people perhaps haven't got that technical background. And stuff's gone off the syllabus, like building construction's off the syllabus, some of the science is off the syllabus. Can I make something that people can pick up in the toilet, on the station, read a chapter, immediately get something out of it that's useful? And that's how that first book came about.
I was going to ask, when did you start writing? Because writing a book... I know a few people that have done it. Is a colossal discipline. It's not a quick thing to do. When did you first got the itch to start doing that? You say that you'd seen things changing.
The textbook sort of really came about around that time, and I sort of got it upstairs. Now the first draft I wrote in a weekend.
Really?
Yeah, of fire dynamics for firefighters, because it's not new information. It's nothing that it's not like groundbreaking research or anything, but it's just framing things in an accessible way.
Mate, it's an exactly analogy of the podcast. I always say a lot of this stuff here is we're just trying to give it to people in a way that is useful to them and the way that they can digest it and use it. Because some people won't go back and look through the textbooks or go and pick up the manuals anymore.
I mean, we're using simple analogies and things like the gas laws. I mean, firefighters on station aren't necessarily going to be saying, well, this is Boyle's law, this is Charles' law, this is universal gas law. Yeah. But they can think of a concept of three things, of pressure, volume and temperature, and think, okay, so if we've got this can, a sealed can, like a soup can or whatever, a fixed compartment, the volume's fixed, isn't it, of the actual, the boundaries. The volume of the contents isn't. So if you start heating it, say it's all full of water, that's going to expand as it turns to steam, isn't it? Okay, so we've got the temperatures going up, the volume inside is increasing until it becomes fixed. So then you fix the volume, temperature's increasing, so the pressure is a variable. So the pressure's going to increase, and that's when you get your levy. And you can apply that to, that's why you get your signs and symptoms of backdraft. Yep. Because the temperature's fluctuating. That's why you get that bounce in neutral plane. That's why the gases expand, the gases contract. And you can lend that to sort of, your gas cooling and so on and so forth. And it brought me into contact with John McDonough, you've interviewed.
Yeah, John speaks well of you.
That's very kind. Millions don't. But,
well, John's a good one to have in your corner.
John and, Paul Grimwood, I'm sure you know, Ed Hartin, and notably Sian Raffel. From Queensland, Australia, who they authored a book, I'm sure John's told you about it, 3D Firefighting. Yeah. Which, again, was a little bit of a game changer. And 3D is a great book, but it can be a little bit difficult to access because
it's heavy
chapters written. So I said, well, I got in touch with them. I said, I'm doing this. It's, in effect, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel, but it's going to be a stepping stone onto.
It's like micro sessions of
your work,
the big heavy digestion of that work.
And I mean, and all very helpful. But Sian really took an interest, and when he got a copy of the first book, says his speciality is obviously reading fire. Obviously in tactical decision making. Said, well, we can run this into another book using the concepts you've established in fire dynamics for firefighting. We can go into this onto reading fire and use some of the models he was developing. So we collaborated extensively with that, and then that went into fighting fire, which is a.
This must have been taking a lot of your time.
Yeah, well, I had nothing else to do.
No, but still,
I was self-unemployed.
Yeah, but it's a hell of a discipline to still be pouring all of that time into.
Yeah, well, I was I had nothing else to do. Like Stallone writing the first Rocky. But
many people don't think they have things to do, and they still manage to throw their life up the wall doing nothing, though. Yeah. So it's a discipline to still, lean in, despite all your setbacks, to continue to lean in on something like that.
So we pushed, and particularly fighting fire, which I think is really underrated. I mean, I would do. Maybe that's just vanity. But it's based around the concept of fighting every fire using at least a two-pronged approach of controlling the water and controlling the air. Which is basics. I mean, Braidwood was doing that 160 years ago. But it's really looking at these things as being working in tandem, and I don't think we do. And one of the things where the UK really cocked things up, in my opinion, was separating tactical ventilation training and PPV training and smoke curtain training from fire behaviour. So look, it's all part of the same.
Because
game.
They all change a different dynamic of the situation, so they feed into each other.
Yeah, so the books did all right, and then we.
Well, they're still out there. We'll reference them in on the notes of this as well.
And they're still on the syllabus for IFE exams. And I think
that was the first time I saw Fighting Fire. I'd heard of 3D firefighting before then, but again, they're all still on that. People look on the syllabuses.
I mean, Fire Dynamics for Firefighters is now the second edition out. We've redone that and added in an e-copy, which has actually got links to videos in the YouTube channel and various other things. So people can. There's a more interactive learning edition for certainly the youngsters that prefer to learn on devices.
That's the second edition of Fire Dynamics.
Yeah, Fire Dynamics for Firefighters. Yeah, so we've done that, and we've obviously got the course as well, which is I'm going to say it's like CFBT instructor's course, and it is recognised by the IFE, but it's more of a tactical firefighting instructor's course because all the vent stuff's in, the decision making's in, the health and safety of setting up and designing trainings in, the hygiene measures, the anti-cancer measures, so on and so forth.
How's that delivered?
We deliver it in person.
Okay.
On courses now, it's mainly overseas. We've got a number of clients all over the world.
Who's we?
Sean and myself
Wonderful.
run it. I mean, Sean's it's his baby, really. He's developed it over a number of years. I'm adding in a few other bits and pieces, obviously, in terms of training, design, UK accreditation. We've got accreditation as a level 4 diploma in it. We've worked on that, and I think the countries that have been, Japan have been done, South Korea.
Wow.
We're completely sort of we're non-political, so we've done...
Are you able to carve opportunities to be able to deliver parts of that yourself still? You're able to travel with it still, or?
Yeah, I can still move. I mean, obviously COVID restrictions notwithstanding.
Yeah.
But we've done Israel and Iran, so
wow, mate.
You know, we're crossing geopolitical lines. I mean, I would certainly be there to support anybody that wants to progress. I would say that any advice that I would give to somebody, I would say get advice from a number of sources. I'm not always right, and my approach isn't for everyone. It's probably a little bit too confrontational, you know, butting my head up against a wall at times, but it's something that I've had so many setbacks. I know that if somebody slams a door in my face, it's not the end of the world. Where somebody else, it might dent the confidence severely. So my way isn't always the way. But yeah, we did that, and then we were over at FDIC.
I've literally gotten that written about speaking at FDIC. How did that come about?
Some gigs. Well, Bruce Varner, who was Bruce is a great guy. He used to work with Brunacini, who we mentioned earlier in Phoenix, and Bruce was heavily involved with the IFE. And when I won the Godiva award, you know, ended up getting introduced to Bruce, and you know, we corresponded, and he said, what are you working on? And he said, well, there's an opportunity to present this here. So, you know, we applied, and Bruce introduced us to Bobby Holton, who obviously runs it, who became friends with, and Bobby believed in what we were doing and kindly gave us the opportunity, and I think we did 5 years off the spin.
Wow.
Either as a double act or doing that. But the actual show, there's twofold ones with it. I mean, I do a little fire dynamics for firefighters show, and it's teaching fire dynamics and science concepts, but using everyday items. So we teach flow paths using, you know, like the roll, sort of in a toilet roll tube or a kitchen roll tube. Teach about flow paths using that and some talcum powder. You know, we use stuff like balloons, those little coffee cans like Millicano. Yeah. And your lighters, you know, like a kitchen lighter on with like the pen lighter type thing. Yeah. You know, we'll use that to teach flammable range. Yeah. We do all kinds of stuff and have a
really applicable for the kinesthetic learners, which the majority of firefighters are, to get a conceptual understanding of what the theory is.
Somebody can remember that at 3 a.m. Rather than, you know, going into the depths. But we have a bit of fun with it, and we get like volunteers up, and we have a laugh and a joke, and it's not very politically correct. And okay. It's quite funny actually, because I used to tell a few stories whilst we were setting up the next little demo. And as we went on, sort of, you know, first couple of years, like by the third year, we were like selling out the room. There's the irony that we actually had from the Indianapolis Convention Centre. We actually had some of their staff and the Indianapolis Fire Department, the fire marshal's office down, saying you're over capacity here. You know, we were. I think
hell of a compliment.
We had like 400 or 500 in the room. It was absolutely mental. But you feed off that energy. Yeah. You know, we're telling jokes left, right, and centre, and there's some crosses the cultural divide. Some doesn't. Yeah. You know, there's certain.
There's certain aspects of firefighting that's the same no matter where you go, isn't there? People have that sort of character, that sort of sense of humour.
We have a little joke about it, and. Particularly if there's a couple of Brits in the audience as well, you can do a Jimmy Savile reference and only hear two people laughing. Now then, let's move on to the next demonstration. But, but no, it was good. I mean, obviously, the pandemics put a little bit of an end to that. But what is a massive shame for me, though, I think, and I'd like to think that I've contributed. And although my career was interrupted, really, as I was beginning to enter my prime, at least from where I was, at least I'd like to think that I have managed to touch people. Now I've managed to touch, make a positive impact. Whereas, so although it's not ended or as I perhaps liked,
I know it might be hard, and I know we all have different chapters of life.
I think the thing is now, if nothing happens, at least I can say, well, I made a positive impact. It was worth it. Where if I'd have walked away at the time when I got shafted, it wouldn't have been. Not for me. It would have played on me, and it would have been 17, 16 years, whatever it was, wasted at that time. Whereas now, I think, well, if that is done, and like I say, there may be a cameo appearance from the wings, but I've got a couple of small health issues and various other things which makes it unlikely. And if someone knocked on my door and says, "Yeah, come back as a principal officer," it would be, some very long, dark nights of the soul working there if I could do it again. But
do you think you would?
If it was the right time, the right metric, I'd like to get in. If someone says, "Look, come for 2 years, 3 years, ACO, put training and ops right. This is it, and we'll back you, whatever you've done." And you knew that you could make a difference, I'd do it in a heartbeat, without exception.
Do you think you could make a difference?
Yeah, but again, it'd be reliant on that support. If they said, come back, do a DO's job or a group manager's job, but you've got to go along with all the, the PR and everything like that. Just, I couldn't do it because I find it so disingenuous.
Okay.
I would rather people just be honest. And as we said earlier on the other chapter, it's not that I don't care. I'm not really bothered by what people do off duty or what they're into, as long as I can treat them well as individuals and they're there to work. What I don't want to do is be photographed or pictured on the brigade website or the internet or Instagram or whatever, waving a flag or wearing a ribbon or pretending to be interested in something that I'm not really. Because for me, that's disrespectful to the those that it's meant to benefit. And if
really
people have legitimately got it, but don't. There's people that I know at various brigades around the country, and I've seen them again in those kind of positions, and I know them. And I think no, you're not. You are not genuinely interested in this. That you've done it as a career move.
Okay.
And for me, it's insincere. And I'd rather have, like I say, just be honest about it and say, look, we're not going to discriminate against anybody. We're not going to treat anybody badly. We're going to give everybody the respect as individuals, and we're going to reach out whether groups have got lobbying voices or not. And we'll try and help everyone because that's what we're there to do. But I'm not going to pretend to understand something or pretend to be into something that I'm not. I'd rather be who I am. Just say, that little bold man wandering around the training school.
Well, look, Ben, thank you so much for your honesty today, mate. I really appreciate you coming down. I really appreciate you sitting down with us. I'm sorry it's taken so long for us to put it together, but
thank you for having me. Thank you for the opportunity. And
I know, without going into too much detail, this hopefully is not the end of your story. I know you still have projects that you're working on, and I hope to see your story told in different ways in the future.
Well, we have things do take a twist. I mean, and the truth is stranger than fiction. And with regard to that criminal conviction, again, it's something I've always maintained my innocence of, and there's been copious evidence of not only my innocence, but that things weren't done correctly. And, you know, we've talked a little bit about missing information, failures in disclosure, and again, that's been picked up legally. And the Information Commissioner's Office have really sort of got in the corner and said, hang on, you know, this stuff, if it's missing, is either a huge data breach that's had impact on this guy's life, or if it's never existed, that's been a malicious prosecution and lawful charge. So that's in progress at the minute, and, you know, should be coming somewhere to a court near you.
Ben, thank you, my friend.
Yeah, thank you.
Really appreciate
Thank
it.
you for having me.
Look after yourself, and I'll see you soon.
Stay lucky.
The Firefighters Podcast is a global podcast seeking to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operators. Through a series of wide-ranging conversations celebrating those within our sector, we seek to encourage and support this incredible group of people. It's brought to you by myself, operational firefighter Pete Wakefield, and I speak with individuals from all walks of life who I sincerely believe can add value to or develop those who have chosen this life path. Please support your emergency services wherever you are in the world, and thank you for listening.